So good afternoon to everyone we have in the press hall and everyone watching and listening to us online. So Ukrainian Crisis Media Center is continues functioning, and we have another event, the World Religion, dedicated to the World Religion Day. So Liudmyla Filipovych, the president of Ukrainian Association of Religion Scholars, I pass the floor to you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants and dear listeners. Traditionally, it's the third Sunday of January. Traditionally, it's marked as the World Religion Day. This tradition started in 1950 upon the initiative of such religious community as Baha'i faith. Since 1950, with the support of international structures like the UN, this day has become a reminder for all of us that all religions are based on ideas that are able actually to unite the humanity. So today we decided, like, before the holiday itself, January 21st, the World Religion Day. So we'd like to talk about the changes that Ukraine is coming through and the world is coming through, have come through recently, for us to understand how shall we live after the victory, what values shall we establish in independent Ukraine, and how will this affect the general development of humanity. So today we have participants, we have speakers, Head of State Service and Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Worship, Ministry of Culture and Information, Doctor of Philosophy, Viktor Yelenskyi. We also have Head of Religious Studies Department, Skovoroda Philosophy Institute, National Academy of Sciences. We have Alexander Sahan, a professor. So next to me, we have Father Georgy Kovalenko, rector of St. Sophia Open Orthodox University, and he's a PhD as well. Yeah. We also have Ruslan Halik, a religion scholar, head of project Religion and Fire, PhD in philosophy. He'll tell us about his project. And we expect Stanislav Nosov to come still, the acting head of all Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations. He's the president of Ukrainian Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I will moderate this event. Liudmyla Filipovych, president of Ukrainian Association of Religion Scholars. I'm also a professor, so I want you all to start the discussion. And I pass the floor now to Viktor Yelenskyi. He is basically the initiator of this meeting, and he will tell us about his vision, his idea, how he sees those changes in the world and in Ukraine. Please, Viktor. Thank you so much, Liudmyla. Thank you so much, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening, watching us. I'd like to remind you that traditionally, in the end of January, we have a couple of important holidays and events related to religion, freedom of worship, solidarity with churches which are oppressed in the world. So the World Religion Day, that was already mentioned by Ms. Liudmyla. Also, the Day of Religious Freedom, January 16th, that is, and the day of Martin Luther King's junior memory. As we know, he was a prominent defender of the civic liberties, including the freedom of worship, and all these events that I mentioned. These are concentrated in one specific period, and these push us towards discussions and elaborations. What is happening with the freedom of worship in Ukraine and the world? We've been talking. We talked like what happened in those countries where the freedom of worship is denied, and of course, we couldn't imagine even back then, when we started these specific events, we couldn't even imagine back then when we started that our people, Ukrainians staying inside occupied territories in Crimea and Donbass, that our people, our citizens will suffer from unprecedented oppressions, from the violations of their freedom of worship, something that we forgot about, something that happened in Middle Ages, that priests will be killed. We never thought of that the members of religious movements will get 19.5 years of imprisonment because they are convicted. Even Hizb ut-Tahrir did not get that during the Brezhnev times, So we couldn't even imagine, back then that hundreds of buildings, religious buildings, will be destroyed, and we couldn't even imagine that the whole communities of Baptists and other religious communities will find refuge, will just leave their places, will flee, and they will go to government-controlled Ukraine, as it happened in Balaclava, for example. But not only that. So I just don't want to take a lot of your time, and we have very interesting speakers today. But I just want to remind you that Ukraine historically has always been a place of refuge for those who were oppressed for their religious beliefs, that Ukraine has all the capacity, all the opportunities, and we as Ukrainians can be proud that in our country is the land where religious freedom for each and every person is not just like declarative, but it's actually there. It exists. So there are no privileged churches in Ukraine. We have unique cases when we have cooperation between various religious organizations, like where the voice, for example, of a small German Lutheran church in All-Ukrainian Council is as loud as voices of other churches, like the Orthodox Christian Church or Greek Catholic Church, whatever. All the voices are equal there. So the smaller members are equally present as the bigger ones. And this is quite a unique situation for the modern world, especially for Europe. I also would love to say that if we look back at our meetings, we try to hold these meetings annual, at least we try to, yeah? So if we take a closer look at 2023, we can see that religious communities in Ukraine, they consolidated to help the armed forces and the civilians. I don't want to push some statistics at you, but they were dragging, humanitarian aid here to Ukraine. They were pushing it here, and they were stepping at the front line of the struggle. As also military chaplains, they were present there at the front line, and some of them even lost their lives as military chaplains, but the non-combatants. They still were people without weapons. They didn't hold weapons. As chaplains, a lot was done by religious organizations and churches to help those who were in need, those who were struggling and in hospitals. So many people got their help. We're just like drawing this concluding line. We're collecting the data, but someday I think that everyone who did that and everyone who was there at the front line, we will definitely honor them as we should. I also would love to mention another thing, just a couple words. As Father Georgi, before the meeting, told me that in Brussels today they had an event where the representatives of Russian Church and people I don't know very well, but they call themselves human rights activists. They were talking about anti-religious oppressions in Ukraine. Within the recent months, I've spent a lot of time discussing this issue. We definitely can claim who is pushing this propaganda on these so-called oppressions, religious oppressions in Ukraine. We can see how many resources are invested in it. Nobody actually even conceals how much money is invested in it. And that recent thing, many of us heard that in the interest of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy, the lawyer was hired, a lobbyist, to defend their interests, who has like $1,400. He's paid $1,400 per hour. That's his rate. So we have enough of places to invest, for all of us, for civilians and military. Though this is a good campaign, it's well-funded. A well-funded campaign, I'd say. But in Ukraine, we never prohibited any type of church and any type of religious movement. When Ukrainian state, let's say, merged, since back then we never prohibited anything when it comes to religion. And there is such a reputable Pew Research Center, analytical center, and they have these annual or once per 2 years, they have these surveys and studies on religious oppressions in the world. 41 country was mentioned in the last report where one or more churches are prohibited. So Ukraine is not on the list. It's not there among these 41 countries. So in Europe, only a couple of basically states there are. And of course, Ukraine is not there. It has never been. So the campaign that was raised around the draft law 8371 that sort of like prohibits Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy. Well, it's not about prohibition per se. This draft law that passed the first reading and is prepared for the second one is aimed at, what is the aim of the draft law? In Ukraine, we don't want to have any religious organizations which are subordinated to religious centers located in a country which is aggressor against us. So we speak about Moscow Patriarchy. It's a direct participant of war against Ukraine. They act against us. So Ukrainian government, Ukrainian state is general. So we have enough grounds to demand the religious organizations to get rid of any subordination and any relations with centers located in aggressor states. The same happens like with some Western European governments. If they demand women not to wear hijab or other headwear, or maybe not to build some religious buildings, so we have the same grounds. So this draft law that I mentioned, it stipulates that in Ukraine, it is not allowed for any religious organizations to act in the center located in the country which is demonstrating aggression towards Ukraine. It's not discriminatory. It's not against some organization. It's just to break this connection. This is the first. Secondly, this draft law stipulates that if a special study, special examination identifies this kind of connection and relation there, the state body responsible for religious affairs gives a special order to this organization and tells that, dear religious organization, let's call it like this. So you are not supposed, you're not obliged to have any connection with the center. And what is the connection about? Your leaders are members of this organization, council or assembly or whatever, so they are present there, they're present in the structure. So we would love you to break this connection. We ask you to do it. If religious organization breaks the connection, it still is functional in Ukraine. If organization does not, if it ignores, well, the state body responsible for religious affairs is fully entitled to ask the court, to ask the court to cease the functioning of this organization, to cancel it. So, how it should be made in democratic society, the court decides. The court gives the final word in this whole story. I had so many discussions about this topic, but I haven't heard so far these two important things. First, what is the value, let's say, what is the value of the connection with Moscow Patriarchy for Ukrainian Orthodox Church, okay? What is the value? Why it's so important? Why can't they break the connection? Like, why it's so valuable? Oh, the depth. What is the depth? What is the intention to have this connection, to keep it? Because it's not the requirement of Orthodox movement. And the draft law, which will definitely soon become a law, will be voted as a law. How does this draft law or law violates international principles of the freedom of worship? How exactly? Like, in which way? It somehow limits Ukrainian citizens, or like what it's doing, like what's the effect? I still haven't received the answers to that question. I had people were talking about themselves, about their relatives, and so on, but no clear answer I got. I still don't have it. I'm so grateful for attention, and I actually passed the floor back. Thank you, Viktor. Thank you. If we have any questions, I think at the very end we'll just leave some time for it, for you to give details. Okay. Before I actually pass the floor to Alexander, who will tell you about the changes that we had in religious life here in Ukraine, I'll give a couple of words, because this is related to international situation and how the life changed, how the religious life changed in general. So I just want to push you back to the book that was published in December 2023, and I will show the title. Here it is, Religious Transformations, Geo-religious processes and confession and denominatory transformations in Ukraine. But before we go back to Ukrainian situation and give very deep analysis here of those changes the world is going through within the last 15-20 years in religious domain. So this book it still exists only in the electronic version. It's placed on the web page of our Philosophy Institute, where actually we consider those changes that humanity is facing in the beginning of the 21st century. And a couple of very important trends are underlined there, which prove these transformations are happening. First of all, qualitative, quantitative changes in religion. And we know and remember, Viktor wrote in his book about it, when he mentioned that Christianity is dragged down to south, as you called it, is shifting southward, yeah? And what we mean that Europe stops being a center of the global center of Christianity, let's say. And colossal changes are happening in the Muslim world, which moves southward, shifts southward, and southeast direction. Demographic changes are there. Demographic characteristics of various religions. By 2050, we predict that the number of Christians and Muslims, as a result of effective demographic growth in the Muslim community, will be almost 50-50. So we say that there are colossal changes due to migrational processes. Religious pictures in specific countries are changed. Migration is a huge factor. In 2020, according to IOM, that approximately 300 million migrants There were, including internally displaced persons. The number of migrants reaches 1 billion. Yes, of course, each migrant is bringing to a new location, bringing one's religious beliefs, but it's there described with graphs, with evidence, with figures presented by the author, Miss Alla Aristova. So I really want you to take this as a background, and I do hope, Alexander, that this book will definitely be translated into English. It's worth doing that, and I do hope that our foreign colleagues are watching us to read like what's happening in the world from our perspective and in Ukraine as well. Okay, I pass the floor to Alexander Sahan, who will tell us about the qualitative and quantitative changes in Ukrainian religious life. Thank you so much. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I will be very brief. I'll represent the institution that I am a part of. I can see people here who maybe are not aware, but those watching us on the stream maybe not all know that there is a religious studies department in Philosophy Institute, Academy of Sciences. This is the only academic institution dealing with religious studies. For more than 30 years, we've been handling the studies related to religion globally and nationally. Freedom of worship, let's take this as a domain, not just religion per se. So for so many years, we've been publishing this annual publication, Religious Freedom. And Alexander is the editor of it. 25 already we have volumes, yeah. And annually, we try to analyze the trends, that we have in the dominant freedom of worship in Ukraine and in the world. So apart from that, we also are carrying out expert and analytical activities. We have only 12 employees as of now. But every year we produce from 500 to 1,000 of expert opinions, interviews. We're contacting the mass media. We're very active. We're trying to analyze and tell and give our society the objective picture, as objective as we can, like what's happening in the dominant freedom of worship, especially after 2022. The need in that analysis has grown because the number of fake news is growing and propaganda is deliberately presented fake news on what's happening in the domain of the freedom of worship in Ukraine. So a lot of fake news are there. If someone thinks that this is this is not directly affecting our military capacity and our defense capacity, I can say that use of those fakes abroad and the attempt to show Ukraine as a non-democratic country or a country where the freedom of worship is violated, liberties are violated. So this whole thing may lead us to limitations. The military and economic assistance may be as a result, it may be limited. But last year, for example, those calls from Trump Jr., we've had these, when he was trying to use this information from the Moscow Patriarchy, saying that, like in Ukraine, we are oppressing the freedom of worship, oppressing the adepts and followers, to stop providing any assistance to Ukraine, which is, as he said, a country where the basic rights are violated. So this work is being done by us. We consider it to be very important, and we are trying to pay a lot of attention to it as much as we can. Speaking of the trends, I just want to give a call to all of you. Read the monographs. Okay, I will not, it doesn't make sense now to give you the list. You can find it on the webpage of the Philosophy Institute. It's there, all the list of monographs. The last monograph religious processes in Ukraine and the world, where we showed in December 2023, we finished this work. We showed the trends that we have today, the current trends in so many churches, and the problem with the so-called Russian world. The problem were tied to Orthodox churches, but it's also, there's another big problem, the Eurasian problem, which is a little bit broader even than the Russian world problem. And this Eurasian problem, as we call it, it has been there in Ukraine for so many years, and it's been evolving, and I can say that even before the Russian world, it's been there. In many Protestant churches, they even unintentionally are promoting those ideas in Ukrainian environment and the global environment. And we have to tackle that as well, and we have to realize that. The next thing I'd like to stop at, in my opinion, we make a mistake when we say that all religions in Ukraine are equal. Truly, there is a nuance. People mix equality and equity. Okay? So we can say that there is certain equity. Okay, there are the same rights which are placed in the laws, but also there is equity when it comes to obligations. Okay? Also stipulated by the laws. And we have to draw attention to the following. Some of the religious institutions are ignoring, neglecting their obligations, let's say. And as of now, we can see the mass negligence when it comes to enforcement of applicable legislation. It's not about the law of Ukraine on renaming, as we call it. There are so many objections and discussions around it still, but even the basic enforcement of the business court's decisions. The brightest example is the building they're trying to build next to the Setina church. There are like opinions given by all the possible courts to cancel it, but it's still there. The crane is still there. It's like they don't stop it. So all around Ukraine, we have so many cases of negligence when it comes to court decisions. Failure to actually comply with the decision. We have to pay attention to it. Quite often we're trying to become the advocates of religious institutions, forgetting that religious institutions also bear certain obligations and they have certain rights as well. And their clerics, the bishops, these are also Ukrainian citizens just like all other citizens, okay? Therefore, this nuance, or let's say this very thin blade that we have, thin line where the cleric ends and where the Ukrainian citizen starts and vice versa. It's a very thin blue line. So we have to understand and distinguish this. Also, I'd like to draw attention to the following. Already today we have to start thinking of the situation in the occupied territories, what we have there currently. We have territories which are occupied like for 10 years already. Drastic changes happen there. Drastic, radical changes when it comes to reformatting of religious environment, like in Crimea, for example. Quite recently, I've been a member of the expert group handling the analysis of the situation together with Ruslan. We are the co-authors of one of the documents. And we also have to understand what are the trends which will emerge after these territories are liberated. And for that, we need a huge pool of experts and state officials, those people who would analyze the situation. Because it's quite complicated already that they're having those territories, not to create more complications, not to make it more difficult, and to create a good trend, create a trend for the positive shift in this case. And I move to a broader problem. preparing the staff in Ukraine in religious studies domain. Unfortunately, today this is like catastrophic, I can say. Ukraine as a state somehow considers that the positive dynamics that Viktor mentioned in the freedom of worship, and that we don't have big problems that many other countries do have. That this is a natural process that happens without any interference, but this is hard everyday work of so many people that contribute to it. Those with professional qualification and special degrees and practical experience. These people actually help us to eliminate that. And today, in fact, we have the elimination of this domain. I mean, the religious studies. It's vanishing, and the consequences will be really harsh. And I would say, economically and politically, harsh for Ukraine unless we correct it now. Because, yeah, this is really important. So I want. Well, it's hard to talk to state officials because they already have certain already have like certain ideology, but religion scholars will become extinct soon. That's what I want to tell you all. And we will have so many problems soon. Especially when we speak about state officials and state institutions. Viktor can confirm that it's not so easy today to find a state official who would be qualified enough to qualified enough in the domain of religious studies and jurisprudence, but we'll have fewer and fewer of those people. In general situation in Ukraine today, it's hard to analyze. Even for sociologists, it's very hard to analyze it. Recently, we've had a big roundtable of Razumkov Center where they analyzed such basic trends caught by sociologists. What's interesting, what's like typical, some processes, some trends today, even they cannot grasp those, you know? This is like a shift in denominations due to internal and external migration. Refugees, when they go to new environments and new conditions, especially those from Eastern territories, those which have very weak connections with church. For example, when people consider themselves to be Christians, but they basically know nothing about Christianity and they don't visit church. Today we have this trend of shifts, denominatory shifts. Not just the jurisdiction shift, but the denomination shift. When Orthodox Christians become Protestants, Protestants come from one denomination to another, and so on. Today, these trends are still evolving. It's the initial stage, but I think that those will grow fast. I'm stealing your time already. Just to conclude, the Religious Studies Department, it has been one of those institutions that actually initiated the celebration of the World Religious Day in Ukraine, and we will continue, of course, this good tradition. I think it's a good tradition, and we will do everything we can for us not to replace those concepts, for freedom of worship to be understood as it is understood globally, and international law as well. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you so much. Well, the World Religion Day, it's mostly about positive discussion. So we have positive discussions about religion, but I think that we can express gratitude to religious organizations, mostly, for their adequate response to the changes related to the full-scale invasion of Russia. Unfortunately, we don't have representative of All Ukrainian Council. We would express our gratitude to him personally, but apart from positive things, Ukraine faced also some challenges as well. And who will tell us about the problems that Ukraine has today in religious domain, in social domain, let's say social life? I would love priest Georgy Kovalenko to share us. He is a philosopher, and also he is a priest, and he also is a very clever person. So just to protect the religious organizations, I just want to say that I represent Ukrainian Orthodox Church, but at this meeting, I would introduce myself as representative of certain idea, okay? Idea of the open Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. We need to have an upgraded and clarified, purified from imperial Russian fundamentalist heritage. It should be a different Orthodox Christianity. It's a huge work that we should do. And what Ukrainian Orthodox Church is doing. And one of the areas of that openness, one of the parts of the openness, is being open to representatives of other denominations and religions. A different vision of what we can call unity, okay? When unity does not destroy uniqueness of each, when each and everyone is loyal to one's community, one's denomination, one's ideas and beliefs, sacred texts, and at the same time feels a part of one big family of Ukrainian followers. And to me, it seems that in this sense, the document was important. That was, I read it on Facebook, on my friend's account, who is also a state official, Vyacheslav Horshkov. So he published a document, an order mobilization of 1919, where the first clause tells that all priests are conscripted without weapons. So mobilization is not just about the military to be selected. Mobilization, it's also something that must cover all the society in all those senses, you know, the mobilization of the concept. These senses must be, must reach the priests as well. Mobilization basically is a movement. It's about certain concentration, consolidation. It's like a certain lifestyle, yeah? It's a way of moving to something and someone. I would call mobilization, it's like a sort of a practice, you know? When mobilization as a certain lifestyle, which is based on some virtues. And this is really important. It's important to articulate this and to translate it into like modern language. If we want to live in a country that we fight for, at some stage we have to turn into the country of virtues, where virtues are practiced, not just preached. We showed it very well, that the virtue of courage was demonstrated at the beginning very well, very boldly, but now we have to think of other virtues. Justice. We spoke a lot today that we need to enforce the laws, make new laws, and the virtue of resilience. It's an important one as well. And I would also put this collaboration and joint activity when we all together, regardless of where we are now, when we do the same thing and we are mobilized. Okay, it's about being mobilized. What must mobilize us all now? Yeah. Front line and the front struggle is the most important part. It's the core. But even today, we have those who were traditionally cared by the church and who the church is functioning for. Widows, orphans, people with disabilities, mental disorders, IDPs, refugees. So these all people require our help, us to serve. For the church, mobilization is to serve. And not just these beautiful, beautiful sermons where it sounds very well and it's very beautiful, like once in a week, like 2 hours, but 24/7, that is, not just once a week. 24/7 of routine activities, helping and serving to our followers. That's what we do as a church. That's how we serve to God eventually. So, another important thing that I forgot to mention, spiritual recovery, as they call it, rehabilitation, yeah? The church has now to join the rehab programs as well, established by the state, and also establish our own programs. So this spiritual recovery is required by the military, by the chaplains, who also need our care and help. And I think this is a very important thing. Especially today, church must be mobilized in all of us. And those practices that exist in church and had been developed for millennia, these must be put in practice today to become an integral part of our life. And then definitely we will become the country of virtues, where we will have love as the dominating power, which is the victorious force. And I just want to tell you that the word victory itself, it's, if you take the Ukrainian word of victory, it's a super effort. And do more than you can. We already are winning, already are victorious. We are the winning state, but this is a process. It has to be a continuous one. When we win, ourselves our weaknesses over our weaknesses, and take victory over enemy, and when we'll get the victory over death, to prioritize life and fight the propaganda and lies that of our enemies. Okay, thank you so much, Father. I don't know what more we have here now. The priest, the practitioner, the philosopher, because you are a part of so many projects you didn't mention. And I would love to pass the floor to Ruslan Halikov also, who will tell us about one of the problems that Ukraine will face eventually. We'll live for quite a long time, and we'll try to find a solution for it. We'll have to tell about your project and the problems that you care for. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Liudmyla. Thank you, colleagues. Yeah. A lot of things were mentioned already, and speaking of the project Religion and Fire, my project, everyone heard in the news that the missile hit the church was under shelling, the priest was killed, someone was arrested, someone was wounded. In the occupied territory, it's prohibited for the organization to function. We hear it all the time. We as religion scholar, we've been tracing it and analyzing this. In 2022, when in Kyiv region we had Russians almost surrounding Kyiv, there were murders of priests as well, and murders of religious activists, among those like who become volunteers and tried to sustain life in the occupied territories. Respectively, the shelling of churches started, and there was a need to record that because religious building, any religious building of any denomination, just like hospitals and schools and other social buildings, are protected by international humanitarian law. And the shelling of religious building is a violation of IHL. And deliberate shelling is a war crime. Therefore, recording of those war crimes A recording of IHL violations is an important component for us in future to later file the lawsuits, not only against the leadership of Russia that actually is carrying out the act of aggression, but against specific criminals with their titles, names, those who gave the orders directly. So we have the statistics collected. It may look very raw and dry, but it's not about just figures. It's about tragedies, personal tragedies. In the database of our project that we handle more than 500 of cases, more than 500 of buildings, 520 of various from various denominations that were suffered from hostilities or were completely destroyed. Approximately 9% of those that were where some heavy damage was inflicted. So approximately up to 16%. Altogether, a quarter out of those 520 already cannot be used, for its direct purpose. Sometimes it was destroyed with people in it, like in Severodonetsk, a mosque. Not only that case, people who stayed in the mosque were killed as well when the building was destroyed. So almost each 50th religious building in Ukraine is under damage. 500 is... It may not seem a lot, but it's a lot. Minor damage, almost half of it that we can repair, and many are repairing and rebuilding their buildings, but there are some buildings which were completely destroyed. The majority of those that we counted and objectively, many of those are in Donetsk regions. We understand why, yeah? 102, at least we have in the database. I think more are there. But there is constant shelling. We cannot just reach those places. We cannot record anything there. In Kiev region, more than 80 of religious objects were damaged. In some regions, more than 60. Luhansk, 62. Kharkiv, 61. In other regions, a little bit less, but still it's there. In Kherson, 56 buildings. In Chernihiv, 26. Sumy, 30. We can see that the majority of destructions where the most active hostilities are taking place. Donetsk, Luhansk regions, together these take almost 1/3 of those buildings, religious buildings, which were destroyed, and part of them destroyed with some of them are destroyed with the settlements. With our colleagues, we've came to a village to record a destroyed church, and the whole village was destroyed, like nothing left, just the ruins of houses. Donetsk, Luhansk regions, unfortunately, we have a lot of that the whole settlements are destroyed with the religious objects, of course. So this is a problem for recording as it is, because the Ukrainian process of crime recording, not always law enforcement draw attention to church damages. For them, the very fact of shelling is the violation of IHL and a potential war crime, and they record the very fact of shelling, not always paying attention that this is not just the residential building like school or the whole village was under shelling, but the religious object next to it. We try to explain it to them that this is a very separate case, and it would be important to have a special proceeding for it. But we don't even have in the criminal code so far, unfortunately, a special article on war crimes against religious organizations. There's a draft law to actually have a separate part of Article 438 in criminal code, but it's still not there. Thanks to scholars, thanks to human rights activists, the attention to religious objects which are damaged, the attention to followers who suffered thanks to them. We finally managed to push it to the government consideration, because when they start telling us that we have limitations of rights, violations of rights of citizens in terms of freedom of worship, when it comes to the gravest violations, we have these now due to Russian aggression. So we have actual murders, we have injuries, we have tortures, cases of torture, captivation. At least 5 priests are now held captives. As of now, we know it. Also, Greek Catholics, some of them have been held captives for more than a year. 2 priests of Orthodox Christian Church arrested in autumn by Russians, and 1 priest of Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They didn't like it because of his opinion, and he is held captive now. But so many other priests were held captives, and followers as well. Just the last thing that is worth paying attention: the majority of religious objects which are damaged, those which belong to Ukrainian Orthodox Church at the moment of destruction, Moscow Patriarchy, and approximately 51% out of those which are damaged, so more than 200 of objects, 250 or a little bit more, these belonged to this church, and part of them later shifted to Ukrainian Orthodox Church, a little bit less as of now, but still, it's important to say they are not just shooting at, as they call, Bandera followers, but they also are killing and injuring the Orthodox followers, saying that the rights of these people are violated, but they're brutally violating it. I mean, the Russians, they are doing it, not us. So, representatives of so many other denominations, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Greek Catholics, Roman Catholics, and recently we had this damage inflicted to Greek Catholic cathedral in Kiev. So Muslims suffer as well, and Jews, and representatives of so many religions and denominations suffer from that as well. It's important to underline that maybe for big Orthodox churches it would be easier to recover because they have more resources, more of that, let's say, mutual support, but for minorities it will be harder, to recover. And this will be an unpleasant dynamics that we'll have to fight, that we'll have to struggle. Ukraine is traditionally a place where minorities feel okay and safe, and now minorities have problems. Some religious movements have everything destroyed, everything they had. The life of the community, but we may have in like a couple of those communities around the state. So we already have religious movements and minorities like vanishing, almost vanishing. And this is a very bad thing that's happening, because why we were different from Russia? We were always different from Russia, that we had this free movement for religious minorities. They were safe, they were functioning, but now maybe not the state, but the civic society must keep an eye on this for religious minorities to get help to recover their life in their communities and recover their objects. Thank you so much, Ruslan. I think we managed to bring the key message about the key religious issues in Ukraine before the World Religious Day. If something still has to be clarified, unfortunately, we don't have Stanislav with us, because he, as the head of the All Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, he would get questions like, when will they deblock finally the procedure for new members to be appointed. Other denominations were asking for it. And movements, but unfortunately, the council cannot handle that still, because they have a very weird principle of consensus. If one person is against, then the organization cannot get membership. There was a message from the society that, like, when finally will the All Ukrainian Council collectively establish this prayer, the morning prayer for all the society to be spiritually united, for this morning prayer, and so many other questions we could ask him. We, of course, would love Stanislav to join us next time. If anything, I can see Vita Titarenko raising her hand, please. But you need to have a microphone, of course. Thank you so much. Vita Titarenko. First of all, thank you, dear speakers, for your very detailed answers. I have a question. I combined today two basically rules. As a military and a religion scholar, I have a question to Viktor and to Alexander and to Liudmyla. When it comes to the law that you mentioned, 8371, the draft law, when do we expect its consideration for the second reading? Second question, do we have any safeguarding mechanisms how to affect the Moscow Patriarchy Church? Because we know that this affects even the defense potential of us, especially the front bordering territories where the proportion between two churches 1:7, 1:8, and they're very far from that mobilization potential the father was talking about. I'm very interested about in this specifically. The second question will go to Alexander. When it comes to purification of the Orthodox Christianity, Protestantism, and Eurasian concept, Alexander, how do you think? Shall the war result in clarification of the Protestantism? Because Protestantism shows a lot of potential, and it may give effect because it can be brought to a new level. Do we have the risks for this Eurasianism, to evolve, or we'll have purification? And if you allow me, Liudmyla, the third question to you, because I still haven't read all the monograph that you mentioned. You know that today we are shaping this evil axis, as we call it, that we do feel. Who's in the axis? Russia, North Korea, Iran. What is happening in international religious environment? Because we always say that in religion we have reflections of social processes. Yeah, it reflects the social processes. If religion can hold the potential, not only being a reflective element, but being an initiative, not just reactive but proactive, to engage and to ignite changes in the society. So, when it comes to the draft law, I gave you the general idea. This draft law passed the first reading on October 19th. Of course, there were amendments and corrections to the draft law. Each MP of Ukrainian Parliament is a subject entitled to provide one's comments and corrections. MPs give a lot of, usually. Some provided 100 of corrections and even more. That is why more than 1,000 of corrections and amendments were there to the draft law in total. Many of these, this is my personal estimate, many of these are just spam, just let's call it spam. Just an attempt to create delays. This is a typical procedure, let's say, and something that MPs usually do when they want to postpone the consideration of the draft law, or when they want to keep it on the shelf, let's say. But the preparatory group actually analyzed the 1,000 of amendments. There are some good ones that relate to mechanisms of the law functioning, relating to amendments that shall be brought other laws. It's obvious that this law will be called differently when it reaches the second reading and voted. These will be not just amendments to the law on the freedom of worship and other laws, the law on judiciary, and this is still an ongoing process. When it passes the committee, then it goes to voting. This is for the law. The safeguarding mechanisms, which would eliminate any abuse of religion in the interests of our defense capacity, to eliminate any violations of human rights. You've seen that in 2023, we've had a whole bunch of those actions taken when searches were there and raids by law enforcement, and certain proceedings were initiated against those who were suspects when it came to collaborationism. Even some Orthodox hierarchs were subject to it. Some of them are under home arrest, and there were also steps taken to make it impossible to use any religious objects to disseminate the hostility. If we put it simply, I would say that it's not just the law enforcement activity, but the social trends, the social attitude is that if a priest, let's say, start preaching for the Russian world, this person simply can be taken out of that object of the church, I mean. So we can see the changes taking place in Kiev-Pechersk, Lavra. For quite a long time, it has been the core, let's say, of Russian world, where they were doing some weird things. People were not even allowed to go to the church for their opinions, and the major part of Kiev-Pechersk Lavra right now is. Now it's the core of Ukrainian spirituality, Ukrainian spiritual domain. They're praying for the founders of this church, including Hetman Mazepa, and also the court proceedings are almost finalized. I just want to remind you that in Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, there were colossal violations of applicable legislation and specific legislation related to freedom of worship. And any guide was telling about it. The guides were saying, like, they destroyed this, they put this, they did this, and so on. For so many years, it was tolerated. And what it led us to, in the territory of Lavra, they built 15 fundamental objects and 16 temporary. And many organizations were illegally staying there. And now this whole thing is under correction. According to the law, it's being done. And I think that quite soon we will finalize that. Thank you. Thank you. When it comes to Eurasianism, I call it, 2022, 2022, this whole year became a starting point for the Protestant churches to initiate their purification, at least in Ukraine, get rid of that ideology. Some of these churches reconsidered and made serious conclusions. Some are on the way to do it. But we can see some positive trends there, definitely. And I do think that altogether, with the religion scholars, we will definitely get the result when, just like with the Russian world, Eurasianism will be reconsidered, thoroughly analyzed, and it will just be forgotten by Protestants. It'll be a part of the past, in Ukraine at least. In Russia, we can see an opposite trend. Completely polarized one. Unfortunately, some churches, diaspora churches, still, as of now, they are reconsidering. The process is not all of these are realizing this. In our next monograph that we're about to publish, we'll have a big chapter dedicated to this specific issue. And maybe in 2024, we'll have this big scheduled publication presented where we will actually speak of that issue as well. And we have Mr. Pavlenko, who is digging deep into that, our colleague. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for your answer. I'll be very brief with this really hard question on the axis of evil that is shaped right now, and you call the subjects, the parts of that. It's not tied to religion. If there is unity, it's purely ideological, okay, in this axis. So what ties Orthodox Russia to Muslim Iran or the non-religious China or like North Korea or whatever? So what we still have to, we can't ignore the religious factor, so therefore it requires detailed analysis. I loved not prohibiting, but we have to work with certain problems, not just to close our eyes and ignore. This is not a task for religion scholars, but for diplomats, I guess. It would be really good for them to consult and to ask our advice. And we are so happy to, because we do have specialists who can give some very proper advice. They know what's happening in those countries and their religious environments and domains. Okay, it's like we already are out of time, but I suspect there is a question. And online, and I can see another one. Miss Yaroslava, please. Yaroslava and Irina, maybe? Yaroslav Muzichenko, Religious Information Service of Ukraine. So when it comes to the World Religion Day, how is the world tied to our problems when it comes to our religious organizations? And what's happening with the religion in Ukraine today? How can we affect the world? A couple of words from me, and I guess then Viktor, because they have some ties with international organizations. We stay in touch with various international structures, those celebrating this day with us. 3 years ago, we had the biggest success when all Ukrainian Council even got an award from Jordanian King, for being so active in this interdenomination dialogues. There's a special document that confirms that to establish the tolerant relations between representatives of various organizations. In Ukraine has some good experience. We have festivals held, press conferences, just ordinary scientific conferences. All our activity of the association and our department, we all aim to live in peace, but everybody understands peace in one's own way, so we clarify just peace. If someone wants to clarify, please? I'm not sure I understand the question properly, but if we speak about we have one big general trend, common trend in the modern world. Um, as disseminated from the global west to other countries, religion starts playing a smaller role in everyday life of, let's say, average person, and a bigger role in international relations, in global policies, interstate relations, and so on. Yeah. Therefore, well, why is it happening? We have this identity riots everywhere, you know? In all the parts of the world, people are against unification. People stand against standardization of the world. And they insist on importance of some unique things and unique features, you know? And quite often among these features, we identify religion as well. This may sound very simplistic, but religion has been playing more and more and more important role in political, cultural, public environment compared to everyday routine life. That's where we have the atheists of Kiev Patriarchy. Not the hypocrites, but this is the general trend. What comes out of it? What is the result? The interest to religion in each specific country is high. And the impact of religious organizations on policies, on public domains, is larger than we could imagine. When you observe the everyday practices, routine things of people, religious practices, I mean. If we put it in the most primitive way, people now pray less, but they talk more publicly about religion. We can talk for quite a long time about this, but religion is considered to be a public tool, even used by celebrities and politicians. Of course, us, those who live in Ukraine, it's important for us to have connections and to explain it to our vis-a-vis abroad. What is Ukraine from the religious point of view, okay? Not if every day, but at least once per 2 days. We have reporters from some reputable newspapers or newspapers. Some of those come, I don't even know well, like Colombia, Nepalese, but representatives of those media are interested in us. Like, they ask what's happening in Ukraine, and for them it's interesting to find out. For them it's interesting to compare us with what's happening in their countries. They're interested in how our chaplains do work on the front line, in particular. Beyond the front line, not every person can imagine that a priest per week every day has a couple of funerals per day. And what does it mean for a person who has a couple of funerals to hold every day? Like young soldiers, young officers dying in hostilities. For so many of those people who come, it's quite unclear. They don't understand that in Ukraine, religious organizations can all be equal in the face of the law, because the European system is different. It stipulates that there are churches for which the country is collecting taxes, and those churches don't have the right. But in Ukraine, it's not like this. And it agitates some European experts. What was the last for them to become agitated? I told about religious pluralism in Ukraine, and I mentioned that in the last political cycle, 2014-2019, the head of Ukrainian state was that the Christian, the prime minister was the Jew, the parliamentary speaker Greek Catholic, the secretary of Defense and Security Council, a Baptist. This is a unique thing for Europe, especially where there is no such religious diversity, and in Ukrainian nationalism, there is no such harsh denomination connection. You can be a Ukrainian and true patriot, but it's not necessarily for you to be a Christian or a Catholic. You can just be a Protestant, whatever. So many people are interested in the depth of Ukrainians' faith, let's say, and what this period meant for Ukrainians of the state atheism, when religion wasn't like promoted, but when it was under prohibition, and how the religion behaves after that, after this quasi-atheistic experiment. But just not to waste more time, I'd say religion itself and people related to it are very helpful to promote Ukrainian image in the world. The trip of our all Ukrainian council to US, and our Protestants. 2 weeks ago, they had the trip to the US. It confirms that the world is interested. And again, the last thing. 3 weeks ago, Murder came to Ukraine. The successor of the big media empire, where the Fox News is and so on. Wall Street Journal is there, like in the portfolio, like a big empire. He had 1.5 days in Kiev, not much, and quite a conservative wing. He wanted to meet the religious representatives. They had a meeting in this Metropolitan's house, so their Protestants were there. I'm grateful to all the Christian churches. It was like Sunday, and they had a chance. They find some time to meet. We had Andriy from Bucha, a priest, rabbi, and Muslim representatives were there, and I saw that he was impressed with many things. He was impressed with Andriy Holovin's story. He was impressed with Rabbi's words and many other things. And when he left, he told that the meeting with the religious representatives was the most interesting and the most important for him while he stayed in Kiev. Just one sentence, please. We underestimate quite often the experience of interreligious cooperation in Ukraine. In particular, Viktor already mentioned, I just stress on this, that such thing as All Ukrainian Council of churches and religious organizations, it's unique for the world because in Europe they don't have it, in the world as well, such a structure. So we can show an example of cooperation and coordination when we coordinate the activities of our organizations despite the fair criticism that we had for the council. Well, still, this is a very broad example of how religious organizations can self-organize, coordinate, and we can see adequate statements given by the council regarding the war and good examples of how you should behave in that. Yeah, and Yaroslava, just for you, in our monograph that I mentioned, the chapter 1.3, Religious Factor in International Relations, Key Trends, the beginning of 21st century. Okay, so just read that because you'll find answers to your questions. And the last question, I guess, because we're out of time. Irina Forestian, greetings to all the participants. And I'm grateful to the armed forces. Thanks to them, we can actually now meet during this harsh time. Again, a question to Viktor. Do you actually see if there's any functioning mechanism to create one center or maybe a uniting platform for all the spiritual, religious organizations in Ukraine? Something that can be an important prerequisite for independent Ukraine to exist. And Liudmyla already touched upon that, the second thing. How such a specific step to this unification? Who and when can create this opportunity to establish a common prayer for the victory of New Just Ukraine over the Moscow aggressor? And a prayer and support for the acting army. This is the guarantee for our state to exist as independent. Thank you. I'm grateful to you as well for the question. Your question, Yaroslava's question, are complicated for a state official because these are deep philosophical considerations that cannot be grasped by a state official's mind sometimes, but if I understand that thing properly, we have an actual space where we have representatives of various religions functioning. When we say, like, why can't we do it all together? Why can you be friends and do it all together? We have to realize that religion, apart from all other things, it has some demarcation lines in it, okay? When I say that I am an Orthodox Christian, it means that I'm not a Catholic as well, okay? For some religious representatives, it's crucial. When we talk about religious hostilities and conflicts, they may have this very fragile line between it. Imagine that I am a follower and an Orthodox Christian, I fall in love with a Buddhist, and I know that she will not get this eternal life after death, and for me it's a pain, I cannot handle this. And I say to her, you will just die in hell, and so on. It's important not to cross the line, okay? That delineates your values from others' values, okay? So you should not shift to hate or hostility. We value all common initiatives, joint initiatives that organizations present in churches, and we appreciate all the collaborations that we have, interdenomination and interchurch, and of course, this is a sort of a disappointment still. When ecumenic movement started, everybody thought it will discuss how to be as one, as the Christ said. But it seems that the Global Council of Churches, they don't discuss this common theory, but social projects, how to find, the anti-mine even programs, okay, they start discussing them, have to support that, and I guess we have to promote this, such relations. When it comes to the joint prayer, the prayer that they talk about in the Verkhovna Rada and the draft law exists, I think, this is my personal opinion, I think that in Ukraine, we have this everyday practice in each church, a prayer. And every day in thousands of churches, they pray for Ukraine, for the victory, for our relatives, the ones we love. So when all Ukrainian Council, when it's supported this idea of joint prayer for the victory, I just don't know how it will look like. I don't understand how to make it so that every day, for this to be like a sort of sensation, not to turn into a routine, you know? It seems to me that if a person is sincere about this prayer, wants to pray, this will be like an everyday sensation, a revelation. But how can we make it for the whole society, to spread it for the whole society, for this to become a sensation? Everyday sensation, I think religious people have to give this answer. I don't think that even the most perfect law can actually establish that. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just want to, as a moderator, I want to express gratitude to all of us. First of all, to speakers. Thank you for this gathering. We focused our attention on the problems related to religion, and of course, a lot of work still to do. Everyone is doing what we can, but we have to understand how important it is to concentrate all the resources. And religion actually is a resource because all religions proclaim the very same thing: peace, tolerance, mutual respect. So let us aspire this. Let us nurture those values that we need to have in Ukraine to win in the war, win our